to the Jimmy Tebeau Show on KKID 92.9 FM, Salem, Raleigh.
Greetings, friends and family. So good to be here with you once again. It's Wednesday, April 29th, 2020. My name's Jimmy Tebeau. I'm going to be your host and tour guide once again. This is show number 55. And I got to let you know, it's going to get a little trippy tonight because the theme of the show is
the Psychedelic Experience.
That's right. We're going to be listening to psychedelic music, but we're going to be discussing the deeper realms of the psychedelic experience. For my guest tonight is Daniel Shankin with Tam Integration. This is an organization based in San Rafael, California that specializes in psychedelic counseling through the use of meditations and integration circles, or something like that. So, Daniel, what is your title there?
My title might as well be Program Director for Tam Integration.
Tam Integration. And Tam Integration
offers coaching and psychedelic integration support and harm reduction education for people who want to exercise their cognitive liberties.
I see. So this is like if somebody wants to go on a psychedelic trip or experience, you would coach them beforehand or during? How does that work?
Usually before and after. So, I mean, we kind of take for granted, it's like there is a lot of people who are just ready to go. They were just berserkers. It was just like, let's just see where the chips will fall where they may. I'll see you tomorrow. We'll work it out. But with this new science that's coming out and people are realizing, oh, this has therapeutic value and under controlled settings that like I can really heal from things like trauma and anxiety and depression. And so people who are more cautious perhaps are looking into it and they want to reduce the chances that they're going to have a bad trip or that they're going to get stuck in some sort of loop that they can't get out of. And they just kind of want someone to kind of help them build a couple of skills to sort of meet the challenge. And then afterwards to sort of have somebody to unpack it with, and then somebody to sometimes even like hold them accountable to make changes in their lives so that the realizations they have stick.
So it's a service that you advertise? Is that how that works? So there's a website.
It's at tamintegration.com.
There we go. And then is there a Facebook page?
Yep. Tam Integration.
Wow.
Guess what the Instagram is?
And there's an Instagram. Wow. Yep. Is there anything else? We got 3 social media outlets. There's YouTube, Twitter.
There's a YouTube.
So Tam Integration, let's talk about maybe when it started. Did you start this? Is this your baby?
I started it.
Okay.
I started it because I needed it.
Love it. Love it.
I started it because I needed it. Integration was starting to become sort of a buzzword in the psychedelic community. And I was going to a circle here and there, and they were in other parts of the Bay. They were in like Oakland and Berkeley. And that's kind of a long way to go sometimes. You don't always feel like crossing the bridge. Crossing the bridge is like $8. And there weren't many of them. They were like once a month. And so I sort of was like, well, somebody should start one in Marin. And I just kept waiting and nobody did it. So I got tired of waiting, I started did it myself. And, it's been really rewarding because other people in the Bay Area, other people in Marin sort of want that kind of community close to home.
When was this? You've been doing this a few years now?
This has been like 2 years. Yeah. I started off as I had been a yoga and meditation teacher for most of my adult life. I sort of fell off Phil and Friends tour and kind of had been practicing yoga a lot anyway, but found that it sort of gave me the stability I kind of needed after I pushed my head a little bit too far. We're 99, 2000. There was nothing called integration. There was nothing that I knew to help me get my act together. And so I just sort of was like, oh, I'll just like meditate and do yoga like Ram Dass said. And it worked. It was really good. It was really good for me to just do practice. And I wanted to instead of doing real vigorous things, like real physical yoga with like rooms full of people, because that's the model. It's like you got to like pack 50 people in a room and you got to make them sweat. And I don't want to do that. It's just not my constitution. I want to like be real quiet and kind of ask deep questions with like one person or two people. And so I started moving into coaching. And then the people who showed up then, and I would get a lot of artists and musicians, and I would get some like, tech leaders because it is the Bay Area. And then also people started coming to me wanting to talk about psychedelics almost naturally. And so that really kind of made me light up. Like I was really kind of excited by that kind of work. And so just sort of like let myself spend more time there, professionally speaking. It's, it's continues to be super rewarding and super interesting. And people really, really get served. People really grow, in radical ways through using various plant medicines.
I've always called it brain food. If it's used as a tool correctly,
right?
It's, in my opinion, it should not be used as a party enhancer. Although it ends up being that a lot, but it can be used as a tool, and it can be overwhelming for people that don't know. So this is, I think, a great service you're providing.
Yeah. So the thing about, as you're saying, it shouldn't be used as a party enhancement. One of the things that I found is that, I call it accidentally spiritual. It's like people sometimes think that they're just going to enhance their party, and they still have deep, earth-shattering revelations about their life and the nature of reality.
Well, that's probably the people are still going to do it. It's just I'm so opinionated at this point. But right. in these festivals we play, there's people out there totally party enhanced, because that could be the gateway of, wow, I didn't know I was going to get this deep, profound experience from this, and then ultimately leads them to times where they're going to maybe use it as a tool to think about things going into it and out of it, to where it's a party enhancer, but it's also a beautiful thing. So these people that are coming to you, do you think they're more of the first timers or more like the experienced ones, but they want to go deeper?
Well, I can tell you, this is interesting. A lot of the people who show up say, I used mushrooms or LSD in the 70s or 80s recreationally, and then I just got on with my life. And I got a job, and I had a couple of kids, and now my kids are in college, and now I read Michael Pollan's book, and I recognize that like these things can be used in a different way, and I'm curious about doing that. So that is actually the bulk of the people I work with. There's other people like, again, there's younger tech guys. There are, people who've come back from Peru and are having a tough time. Occasionally, a vet, a combat vet or something like that. So it does run the gamut.
I think it's so cool that there's such a wide demographic of people that are tuning in to this whole service that you provide. Well, hey, let's take a break from the discussion. I think it's time to play some
psychedelic music,
just to go along with what we got going here. What I brought in to kick us off is just a psychedelic jam that I pulled out of Birdfest 19 with the swag in the middle of the Saturday show. Check it out. right. That was my band, The Schwag, right there, playing a crazy psychedelic jam at Birdfest 19. That was last September. Yeah, last summer. And that was the Saturday night. We usually do 2 nights, and that was one of the crazy jams. That was all improv. It sounded like it was in the key of A minor, though, but kind of a modal jam. Anyway, it fits in the realm of psychedelic music. I'm trying to be a little trippy. What can I say? Well, anyway, we got a really cool guest this week. It's Daniel Shankin from Tam Integration. He's calling in from San Rafael, like zooming in. Actually, we're video chatting. And a question I had for you was when you get people together for these integration circles and these group meditations and that, do they all come to you? Do you have a place you do that? Do you do that through Zoom like we're doing now? Or do you go to them? Or is it all the above?
All the above.
Oh, I get it.
So, because it's also like we want to serve people where they're at. It's like what good is this if it's not inclusive? You know what I mean? It's like, like mushrooms are for like mushrooms grow everywhere. They're for everyone. And care should also be, right? It's like who do we want? Like, if we use these as tools, as brain food and as heart food, I would submit, like where does the circle of care end? Right? It doesn't. Everybody's on the inside. And so we do circles. Right now we're doing circles once a week online. We did it once a month, in real life, but now we can meet once a week. And those are free or by donation, right? Anybody can come to those and pay or not. It doesn't matter. We just want you there.
And that's online? Online?
Yeah. And a really good group of people. And it's nice because, some of my folks from the neighborhood are here, and then like people from Canada show up, people from New Zealand show up. It's crazy. And so like, that's one level. And then I do teach an online class. It's called Sitting for Psychonauts. And it's a 4-week meditation intensive for people who want to have like a meditative mind. There have been studies. One of the first psychedelic studies was called the Good Friday experiment. You heard of this thing?
A little bit, but go on.
Back in the 60s, they were like, let's get, before Timothy Leary sort of stigmatized it, before like the Summer of Love and like the hippie sort of stigma thing happened, the people who were using LSD were thought leaders. And they were writers and philosophers and Aldous Huxley, and they were, intelligentsia and priests and religious people. So they took a bunch of religious people, put them in a church, and gave them a bunch of LSD. They wanted to see what happened. Guess what happened?
They had a religious experience?
They all saw God. And so John Hopkins has done the same study, similar, where they have given psilocybin to long-term meditators. And long-term meditators, on average, have a better time. They report more of like the bliss and the effulgence and the wonder and the beauty, and less of the fear of death and anxiety, right? Meditators simply have more fun. So, whereas I'm not actually advocating psychedelics, I'm advocating meditation, taking care of your mind, taking care of your heart. And then sometimes I have that class. I have a round starting in May, another round starting in June. And then we also just have like one-off things. Like I'll have a conversation with an author. I had a conversation with the woman who wrote the Psilocybin Companion Guide. And we have a nice little talk. Things like that.
I like that. So there's times that you've had groups of 5 to 10 people and you guys hang out for a couple hours. Where do you do this at somebody's house, or do you go outside depending on weather, or it depends
yoga
on
studio, like a copacetic yoga studio.
Sweet.
5, 15 people. And generally the way it goes is someone will share a story, and then people will give non-judgmental, non-advisory feedback, relating and reflecting, very peer-based. Nobody's telling anybody else what to do. Nobody knows better than anybody else. Everybody's the expert of their own experience.
And everyone's sharing, and you're guiding the process of kind of the mindset of the psychedelic experience.
Well, yeah, I do an opening meditation and I watch the clock.
You're getting together as groups and talking about the psychedelic experience, but there's not actually any coaching that happens during the psychedelic experience.
I mean, that is not legal.
Oh, I see. So,
It's like I'm not passing anything out. I'm not putting myself in any kind of
right.
risk.
Well,
Per se.
yeah.
There's a website. You type drugs into a website, my face comes up.
Mhm.
So I play it pretty safe, but I'm still able to add enormous amounts of value in the before and the after. Like sort of with both these circles and one-on-one coaching as well.
Right. Well, I'm glad we got that out there because I would think that a number of listeners right off the bat, when I say what you do, it's like, oh, a psychedelic coach or something, it's like, oh, this guy sits with them while they trip, and it's like, want to make sure people know that that isn't what you do.
Well, you also can't call me and ask me for drugs.
Right, exactly.
Just don't do that.
I figured that.
It's not clever. It's funny because, it says all over my website, like, all the legal stuff, don't do this, don't do that, all this sort of thing. And people will still call me up and ask me to break the law. And I say no. And then they get mad at me.
It's like, that's false advertising, man. It's like,
false
no, it's like,
or they
just
feel like
talk about it.
Or they think it's personal. Like, you're like, I'm not a cop. It's like, I know I don't care. Your copness has no bearing on this situation. Yeah.
Because I don't want people to think, oh, this guy sells drugs and he sits with them. How is he getting away with that? It's like, well, he's not doing this. He's not doing this. But this is what it is, and it provides a realm to do that. Because Tam Integration, that's kind of the focus of the organization, right, on more of the psychedelic end of things.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of falls under the category perhaps of harm reduction. Right, the harm there's as opposed to sort of some kind of punitive or abstinence only sort of thing. Just don't do this. This is bad. This is like, where there's ways to. Well, I mean, the science. Not only is it the science, it comes back. Not only is it not particularly harmful, but it's often extraordinarily beneficial in healing. Right, and especially if done with care and concern, and maybe a little bit of guidance if you don't know what you're doing, people can have life-changing experiences that benefit like their whole families. People get off of drugs that they feel like are hurting them. It's really interesting. There's an entire kind of psychedelic recovery movement that's happening. People getting off of alcohol, people getting off of heroin, things that are really, not to necessarily judge those substances, but these people seem to have a problem with them, right? We'll just say it like that. People are having trouble with things, and they're able to stop harmful patterns and create better patterns with the help of these medicines.
No, I agree completely. Because I have a number of friends that have had great psychedelic experiences, and it's changed their life for the positive, and including myself. And then you hear the rare story where somebody had a bad trip and they've never been quite the same or whatever, but then you wonder if that was going to be the deal anyway, because that people just go that way, whether there's a substance. What do you think?
Well, not only that, but like, did that person receive support?
Probably.
Right? Like, was support that was actually going to help them offered?
Probably not in those situations, and that's why it's rare, and the media likes to exploit those negative stories. Like years ago, somebody jumped out a window of a 20-story building and they were on LSD, and that's what LSD makes you do. It's like,
right, Jay,
yeah, or whatever.
His name is Jay, I think.
I never even looked up the story. I knew it was somewhere,
Jay Arnell. But the thing is like, It's my opinion that there are ways to talk to people whose face was stolen off of their head and help them find it again.
It can be an overwhelming experience. I think it's beautiful that you're there to offer this in a way you are. And this is a full-time thing you do now, right? And you're also going to do a podcast or something? And then you also do another job, or is this full-time, or what's the
I do
story?
some digital marketing consulting. This takes up most of my time, but it's good to have. It's good to kind of diversify your income streams in an apocalyptic world.
Hey, I'm with you on that one all the way. I'm a musician, and I work at a radio station. So, speaking of which, let's get back to some music. On the psychedelic realm, how about some
Psychedelic bluegrass.
bluegrass psychedelic style? Let's see what I got here.
Well, me and my uncle went riding down South Colorado, West Texas bound. We stopped over in San Rafael. It been the road just about halfway. You know it was the hottest part of the day. I took the horses up to the star, went to the bar, ordered drinks for all. 3 days in the sun, on my body hurt. It being summer, I took off my shirt, tried to wash off some of that dusty dirt. West Texas cowboys lays all around, and liquor and money, ooh, they load it down. So soon after better, it seemed a shame. My uncle starts a friend again. Hello, check, and the winner takes the hand. Well, my uncle starts winning. Cowboys got sold. One of them got it, and then two more. Accuse him of cheating. Oh no, it can't be. I know my uncle, he's as honest as me. I'm as honest as any man can be. Rachel Allen. He starts to tell, shot him down, Lord, he never saw. Shot me another, oh God, oh God. Uncle grabbed the gold. We hightailed it down to Mexico. I love those cowboys, I love the cold. I love my uncle, God rest his soul. Taught me good, taught me all I know. Taught me so well that I grabbed the gold. Left his steady, steady side of the road.
That was the Schwag right there with Rachel Ammons playing on the fiddle there. That was a gig down in Arkansas, so you got to call it a fiddle. And she lives down there. The gig was Birdfest, and she was doing a set at the festival we're playing there. We're like, you got to play with this. She's just awesome. You remember her from playing in bands such as Tyrannosaurus Chicken and Ben Miller Band. So she's done tours opening for ZZ Top, Buddy Guy. She got to play with Buddy Guy once. Awesome person, too. Anyway, let's get back to the psychedelic discussion here. We have Daniel Shankin from Tam Integration, and he's zooming in from San Rafael, California. So what else should we get into here?
Well, I wanted to talk to you about music for the journeys.
What kind of music do you suggest to these people?
Well, I mean, this might come as a shock to you, but not everybody wants to just listen to a Dead show on repeat.
What?
I know it's surprising.
Oh my gosh! Why? Okay. Well, what else could they
and
possibly?
That's kind of how we did it when we were kids, right? It was just like you'd have a bootleg tape, and it would just the same one would just keep. It was too hard to change the tape. But I mean, I like those old classic. That kind of stuff speaks to me. I kind of even grew up also listening to like Pink Floyd, like the early stuff, like Metal and Piper at the Gates of Dawn and Atom Heart Mother, and a lot of that stuff was like terrifying. It was just very intense, right? And we would just sort of hold on to our seats, and take the ride. But I think that sort of can build a certain amount of resilience. You know what I mean? Just sort of like it sort of tempers the soul in a certain way. And I got to tell you, to this day, I'll put that. It's almost like muscle memory. I'll put on like 1972 Pink Floyd. And it's just like, my mind is like, oh, okay, this is what's happening. It's very, very comfortable. But one of the things that people seem to like is stuff with no lyrics, right? Music with no lyrics. Music that is kind of friendly and has, an easy rhythm to it. Not no rhythm, but not too driving. World music often works really, really nicely for folks. I worked with one guy, again, he's sort of a, guy in his late 60s, and he put together his own playlist, and it was all this kind of singer-songwriter classic rock, and there was like a little bit of Crosby, Stills and Nash in there, and it was just really a nice playlist. It was really like a very, very sweet playlist. I checked it out. I was like, wow, you did a really nice job with this. And so, it's just, the question is like, how do you create a vibration in the room? Like, how do you create a vibration in the room for yourself that is going to help your mind open in the way that you want it to?
Yes, setting is an important thing that I believe. Where are you doing it? What are the sounds? Lighting, is you don't want real bright. You don't want to have a strobe light on. That'll drive you crazy. Some lava lamps, some low light, some good happy music, but nothing you have to think about or sing along with. I agree. What came to mind when you and me started talking about it was Miles Davis' Bitches Brew, where it's just all improv instrumental music. Right. So there's parts of it that get a little dark though, and kind of almost angry, and very tribal. Right. So it might be select songs off of Bitches Brew by Miles Davis.
Right. I mean, and when I think of that, it's that sort of like intermediate. It's maybe music for somebody who's been through the experience a couple of times and maybe wants to do some deep shadow work, like they want to wrestle with something, right? It's like, that's great music for sort of wrestling,
Oh, for the bitches brew?
Yeah.
I could see how, yeah, right. And
What would
what do you think the deeper stuff would be? Well, Pink Floyd might be too dark for some people because that could be bringing up too many repressed memories.
that would certainly not be, that would be for somebody who knew what they were getting into. I would certainly suggest they listen to it a couple of times ahead of time. I don't think I would surprise anybody with Careful with That Axe, Eugene.
Right. Or The Wall, it's like,
Hmm.
oh, I lost my dad too, or whatever, but there's select Pink Floyd songs that might work for even entry level people, but
Right.
even the song Money might get you thinking about money, so
Yeah, that's a little bit, and also the song Money is a little bit staccato
right, right. And it's
for
an
my
odd time
taste.
signature too. It's like 7/4 time or something, so it's not
Yeah, nobody
regular.
wants that.
Yeah, well, not in that state, and I agree with you. Kind of even maybe major tonalities, which would be more
Mhm.
of on the happier side than minor tonalities.
You know what I found recently to be very, very sweet?
What's that?
It's like um, Interludes for the Dead by Circles Around the Sun.
Oh yeah, because that's the instrumental stuff that they played on the 50th anniversary run, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that is just, I mean, it's like, God rest his soul. It's just like really an amazing piece of work by Neil Casal, and it's kind of just like a masterwork of. I think I think it's kind of a masterpiece, to be honest with you, and the whole thing from start to finish works really well. It pairs well, for example, with ketamine, really, really nicely.
Wow, I would have never guessed.
You would have never- you could have guessed.
Well, if you would have said, "What's this good?" I would have been like LSD, mushrooms. I wouldn't. Ketamine wouldn't have been in the top five.
Mm,
you know,
right.
where apparently that's one of the go-tos. No,
Well,
and
the
it
nice thing about ketamine is that it's legal.
is it now. I didn't even know that. I've never even done it. Isn't that a horse tranquilizer?
Well, interesting thing about ketamine is it didn't start off as a horse tranquilizer. It started off as it's a very, very safe surgical anesthetic. And the number one purchaser of ketamine in the world is the United States military. Because, like, let's say you get wounded in battle, they can give you some ketamine and you can walk yourself off the field.
If you're
Whereas if they
injured.
give you an opiate or something like that, they need two other guys to carry you.
Oh, so it's
And
it's good in battle.
it's good in battle. It's also really good in psych emergency. Like if you show up in a psych ward and you're kind of losing your mind and they think you might be on something else, like ketamine doesn't fatally interact with a lot of things. So you can give some, like a big guy, you can just give him a whole, shoot him with an entire a large amount of ketamine and he'll drop, but there's a very low chance that you're going to kill him.
I did not know that.
So it started as an anesthetic for humans, but what would happen is the humans would come back and they'd be like, I was talking to aliens and angels and stuff. And that made doctors uncomfortable, right? They started to realize there were these psychedelic hallucinogenic side effects. And so they stopped giving it to grown-ups, to adults, and they started giving it only to children and animals because animals don't talk about angels and nobody really cares if children do. Children are allowed to have a strong imagination. And I was actually talking to a nurse, a pediatric nurse, who does preparation work with children before he gives them ketamine. And he'll like ask them to like talk about their favorite stuffed animals, and he'll ask them to talk about like, do they have an imaginary friend, and sort of sets them up to have all of these like kind of good feelings and positive vibes about like lollipop land and things. And then he gives them the ketamine and then they drift off and have a lovely time and they do whatever surgical procedure has to be done.
Oh, I was going to say, why are they giving these kids ketamine? And it's like surgical procedure.
But they're also using it. They're finding that they can use it it's very effective for depression. Like treatment resistant depression reacts really well to ketamine. Like people who are suicidal, they do ketamine a couple of times a month and they're able to function. was kind of a miracle. And I've stayed away from it for a long time too, because, I had friends that abused it. I had friends that you had to peel them up off the ground at the shows, and they didn't make it look good. But, as I started to, I made a friend who is kind of one of the, who's a ketamine scholar, one of the foremost ketamine scholars in the world. And she sort of changed my mind about it.
I had a few friends at a few different festivals that they were all kind of in a puddle on the ground. I'm like, what's up with Bob over there? It's like, oh, he's in a K-hole, man. I'm like, K-hole? And they're like, yeah, ketamine, it's a horse tranquilizer. I'm like, okay, I don't want any of that, because I'm usually got to go to the stage and play, or I'm responsible for throwing an event or whatever. And,
Right.
So probably that person in the K-hole did too much or whatever, or they just...
Well, it's just set and setting. Because,
Right.
as I have found that I like it for deep introspection, right? And exploration of my consciousness, and it is somewhat healing for me. And what I find is that if I take it in an environment with soft light, right, when I want to have something to lay down on, because it's an anesthetic, I'm going to want to have maybe some fruit and some chocolate, and I'm going to want to have some nice music, and maybe like a friend or two who I know I can trust and who will speak deeply with me, where we can really sort of, reason with each other. And so in that environment, laying down on a cushion and listening to circles around the sun is perfectly appropriate. Doing it at the festival, maybe that's fun, but it's a whole different intention, right? The idea of setting an intention is kind of a big deal.
All right, well, that's all fine and dandy, but we got to get back to some more psychedelic jams here. Or psychedelic jams
and psychedelic music with the swag.
when I do mushrooms, like when I'm peaking, me personally, like I'm on my back laying down, yawning a
Yeah.
lot. And
Sure.
I'm like, how can anybody do this at a festival, or or in public or at a nightclub, It's just like I just want to like go to the bathroom and maybe lay in bed. And then, I go deep and think about, things. This last time I did mushrooms, I felt like I was connecting with alpha male wolves from the 16th century in Europe or something. I don't know what.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't, and it was
Tell me more about your wolves, please.
really,
Yeah, that's important. That's big stuff.
really. Oh, 'cause I was somewhat embarrassed. I've only told one other person, It's like, well, you know how wolves, there's always the alpha male, the leader of the pack or whatever. And I don't know why I was, and with mushrooms, it hits me in waves, and I was getting hit with this deep wave, and it was just lights, and then I felt like, and it wasn't words, and it was just more like I could sense and see and feel like the environment, and I could just tell I was like I was that wolf or whatever, and I don't know why, like it's like a cat that's domesticated and it's been fed food its whole life, and then it sees a mouse and still instinctively wants to go catch it and eat it, even
Right.
though it's not hungry or whatever. So, there's us humans. We're connecting with all our ancestors, but I think we're, and after that night, I think we're all connected a little bit more with like all the animals and the trees and the living beings, which is maybe embarrassing to admit or whatever, or too far-fetched for some people, but and I couldn't explain it because it was so, it wasn't overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, I'm scared, what's going on, but it's like, wow, that's deep. Why, of all the things I could have thought about, how did I end up in somewhere in Europe in the winter as in a wolf pack, and that I'm leading these wolves, kind of making the decision of where I'm going to take the group. And it was just kind of a flash, it wasn't this,
Right.
like I was there for hours dwelling on it. It was just kind of one of those flashes on one of those deep surges of thinking about things. Because I went into that night, I think I did like 2 grams of some really good mushrooms that came from a really reliable source. And the idea that night was, like, I got great rest the night before, and I did it by myself in my apartment. I ate good, got good rest that day, and I did it as a brain exercise. And I wanted to utilize it as a tool and experiment with, what it can be used. And I did go into it with the intention of, can I connect with thoughts that my ancestors had, and it's because things happen to them that have given me some sort of instinct of motivation. They did this.
Where in Europe are they from?
What, my ancestors?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot, maybe Czechoslovakia, France.
Okay.
I think it's what Czechoslovakia used to be called, or something. It was a country over there, and it was on my mom's side. My dad's side is French, so maybe. And I didn't even think about it until you brought it up, that maybe that's why, I connected back to Europe somehow, and that would have only been 5 or 6 generations ago. And
Right.
this thing with the wolf might have been, a couple thousand years ago.
Can I ask you another question about the wolves?
Sure.
What did it feel like to have that kind of responsibility? To lead the pack and guide it where it had to go?
Well, I compared it to, like, in my mind, like I'm the leader of the band, so I'm always picking where we're going to go to play gigs. And then for 8 years, I also ran Camp Zoe, a big 330-acre festival grounds with 150 employees. and then we'd have 5,000 people there. And at that point, I'm the main guy, the lead singer on stage. Pretty much everybody there knows that I live on the property and that I own the place, and like I'm the alpha male. And then boom, when I got busted, what are we gonna do? And blah blah blah. And then when I got out of prison, so it's like, I guess maybe at that moment I was vibing that, because I don't, it also made me think, well, how did I ever get into that position, and why did I become this leader of the band, or the leader of the owner of the campground, or the alpha male that's like the guy that stands up and is like, everyone, let's do this, and it's like everyone's like, all right, we're doing that, and it'd be the same thing in being the leader of the alpha male of the troop of, we're going to bed down here tonight, or we've got one wolf that's birthing, so we're going to slow the pace down, or somebody's sick or whatever, or we got to hunt together, and usually the alpha male will lead the hunt or whatever. But
Right.
I guess I was subliminally going, oh, maybe that's where I got the genes to be the guy that's like, hey, why don't we do this? I don't know.
Right. So you're comfortable in that role.
I don't know if I've ever really been comfortable in that role. It's just I wanted to get some things done, and to this day, I'm still like booking the band, and it's like, okay, we're gonna play here, and I'm still hired to produce festivals and that. So it's like, oh, you know what you're doing. We're gonna pay you money to tell us all what to do, and we're gonna have a party. All right, but. And not that when I went into that trip that I was searching for that answer of why I was this, and you just now made me think about it. It's like, why did I go to that place of all places? And because I thought I was going to be more connecting with, people several generations ago in Europe or whatever, and not really into the animal realm. But that same night I was going through different waves and different things, but that was one of the deeper colorful things. Some of it was just perspectives on social interactions with people. It's like, sometimes I'd reflect on a certain part of my life and a situation, and it's like, oh, I miss that person, and oh, maybe that should have went down differently, and blah blah blah. Just flashing to different times of my life. And it's like, why am I thinking of, why did for a minute and a half there I thought about the second grade and that one time we were in gym class. Why did I go there? And I was just letting my mind go. I wasn't trying to force it, or I was wanting to let it flow and guide it in a way too, to where I could, because I was like, man, if it could be like an instrument, and if you practice, maybe you can get good at it. But what does that mean? You get good at it and you can tap into different information. You can open up different parts of your mind that nobody has yet, or you can go deeper with where you're at already. Have you experienced some of that or talked to anyone that's had similar things? Or is my story crazy and I'm a loon?
What do you think that you're crazy and you're a loon?
Not at all. I was just hoping you don't.
No, man. I mean, see, that's the thing, is that community integration is important, right? It's like sometimes we're all wolves, and if we're not wolves, we're eagles, or we're alligators, or whatever we are. But we have incredible depth to us, and for some reason we're embarrassed about like how magnificent we are. Like we're generally, and I don't necessarily even mean our ego, like, oh, I'm so good at this, but just as at an essential level, just our beingness is much more magnificent than we give ourselves credit for. And the thing that it's capable of, and the things that's possible to like evoke and invoke are spectacular. And we've sort of been conditioned to, hide some of that magic. And there's certain bits of magic that perhaps we're comfortable with, perhaps we're like comfortable, like, rocking out on stage in front of people. Like I can't do that. But can we share like the way we explore and excavate our soul and our unconscious, our subconscious. It's like, can we share, like the wolf, to me sounds just like, a very deep and primal part of yourself, that's sort of coming up and being revealed and asking to be related to. And because the subconscious can't really use words, right? It uses images, sometimes flashes. And so, it's important for us to share that, because we're all kind of map makers. It kind of reminds me, integration sort of reminds me like of those old spaghetti westerns where everybody has like a piece of the map to the treasure, and so I can't tell you the amount of times that I've been in a circle and somebody will tell their own story and it reminds me of something that happened to me 5 years ago, and it puts it into context, and all of a sudden it makes sense. It's like, oh, right, that reminds me of the time I was a wolf,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, by sharing our stories and by sharing our ears and listening to other people's stories deeply is like an amazing just gift of presence, And there are also, talking about like kind of recontextualizing my relationships with people is like, I have this one friend, we've been friends for like 25 years or something like that. And we used to, party pretty hard. And we were reflecting that there were times when things would get a little weird, or like someone's feelings would get a little bit hurt. And we didn't have the skills to talk about it. We just sort of writ it off like, oh, he was high and we're just not going to talk about it again. But it bothered us a little, right? Instead of like, we didn't have the skills to clear the air. And, it's like we didn't even have maybe the feeling of worthiness that like, oh, I deserve to be listened to, or the feeling of compassion of like, oh, I want to make sure my friend is okay. And so sometimes, we take this brain food and we get access to like different parts of our mind where it's like, oh, right, like I now see I could have been cooler in that situation. Oh, I now see I could have shown up differently. And so, having a team, having like a squad where that works, where you can show up for each other like that, is like really key, I think, if we're going to like push this movement forward. Like if we're really going to like grow in consciousness, we got to grow together.
Now, when you first reach out, the first thing I thought of is I got this friend in Kansas City. He's all hot to go do one of these. He says his friend does it. He goes to Mexico or something. They do these ayahuasca ceremonies or something,
Mm-hmm.
where you pay this fee and you're there a few days, and then it's like they sit you down, they talk to you for a day, and then the next day you do it, and then the next day you reflect on it or something. So when you brought this up, I'm like, wow, is something like that happening in the United States, except with LSD or mushrooms, or okay, what's going on?
Well, it's happening with everything. Like every major city in the country has an ayahuasca circle, or 2 or 3 or 4.
Well, I didn't even know that. Can you go on that a little bit? What's the story there? What is ayahuasca? Am I even saying it right?
Close enough for a white guy. Ayahuasca.
Ayahuasca. There's no H at the beginning, is there?
Yeah, the H is later in. I'm not a linguistics expert.
Okay.
I am. I'm willing to learn, but as near as I can tell, it's called ayahuasca, and it's a mix of vines and other plants that contain DMT and also MAO inhibitors, right? So that because DMT is easy to metabolize by the body, right? And so DMT without an MAO inhibitor will go through your system very fast, right? And then the MAO inhibitor makes sure that you get a long-lasting journey that is often full of visions and meaning and import, and is often conducted by, hopefully is conducted by somebody skilled who's been doing it for a very, very long time, that is perhaps in a lineage, and, is a person of great ethical and spiritual quality, right? Would be my hope, right? And of course, with the commodification of anything, that's not always the case.
Is this stuff legal?
No.
It's plants. It's like, well, marijuana just became medicinal or whatever, but that's a plant that was illegal. So this ayahuasca is illegal, but there's these groups in the United States that, well, they don't run these ceremonies, but they
Sure they do.
Oh, they do. It's on
Yeah.
the underground though.
Yeah, this is going to come to a shock to you, but there's people out there breaking the law right now.
I can't believe that. Oh my gosh. Yes. Well, something like that they don't advertise on a website or a Facebook page, probably.
Right. I mean, sometimes it'll be interesting. Yeah. I mean,
That seems like a real gray area to where maybe the local police would be like, I don't even know what that is. That even what? That's that weed?
well,
You know?
well, like, for example, in Oakland, there's something called decriminalized nature. And they, on a city council level, they decriminalized, which means they deprioritized psychedelic plants and fungus. So ayahuasca, mushrooms, ibogaine have become in the city of Oakland the lowest priority for law enforcement. They don't go looking for people who are doing things like that. I mean, it doesn't cover sale. Like it's still criminal to buy, sell. And then that doesn't count for, state, county, and federal law, right? But the city police of Oakland are not looking for ayahuasca circles.
Morning comes, she follows the path to the river shore. Lightly sung, her song is the latch on the morning's door. See the sun sparkle in the reeds, silver beads passing to the sea. She comes from the town where they call her the woodcutter's daughter. She's brown as the bank where she kneels down to gather her water. She bears it away with the love the river has taught her. Let it flow, wide and clear. Round and round, cut of the plow in the furrowed field. Seasons round, bushels of corn and the barley meal. Seasons round, creatures great to the spring, black to live again. The plowman is broad as the back, the land he is sowing. As he dances the circular track, the plow ever knowing that the work of his day measures more than planting and growing. Let it grow, greatly yield. What shall we say, shall we call it by name? It's well to count the angels dancing on a pin. What a bright is the sky from which it came. The name is on the earth that takes it in. We will not speak but stand inside the rain. Listen to the thunder shout, I am, I am, I am, I am. So it goes, we make what we made since the world began. Nothing more, love of the woman, the work of man. Seasons round, creatures great and small, up and down, as they rise and fall. Rise and fall. Rise and fall. Rise and fall. What shall we say? Shall we call it by name? It's well to count the angels dancing on a pin. Water bright as the sky from which it came. The name is only that takes it in. We will not speak but stand inside the rain. Listen to the thunder shout. I am, I am, I am.
It's if somebody wanted to do the coaching, like you got people flying in from other countries. If someone out there listening is like, wow, I want to come out and see this guy.
I do. Well, I mean, you can come and see me, but you can also just have a Zoom call.
Oh, that's where I'm going with, because I'm like, I'm missing something here.
It's 2020. You know, I mean, I have clients all over the country. You know, I've got clients in other countries. You know, so you know, and it's interesting. I mean, you saw, like, we can get deep, you know, without having to be in the same room. It's like, you know, we can, when people are present for each other, magic happens. You know, and so that's just what I would suggest. You know, that's what we can get into, is like how I want people within the sound of my voice to take care of themselves and each other. Right. It's like, you know, yes, I've trained, I have methodology for client work, but that doesn't trump presence. That doesn't trump care. I know I'm banging the drum of care, but I sort of feel like, if we want to end this drug war, and we want to make sure that people are not suffering for just wanting to exercise their cognitive liberty and live lives of creativity and joy in the ways that they choose to, right? We sort of have to work at that. And that has to work, on one level, there has to be things like decriminalize nature, which is a political movement. But there also has to be things like a grassroots action of radical personal responsibility. That's one of the things I think is nice about what psychedelics teach us, is kind of radical personal responsibility. Is that like this, you want something done, you do it. You want to be a better person, you become a better person. And so at the same time, integration circle is about taking care of each other. It's like, is somebody has maybe a rough night, and they know that like somebody's going to be there to pick them up, and somebody's going to listen to their stories. Someone's going to make them a cup of tea. We're not a protected class. It's not like we're a different race or a different sexual orientation. We're like laws are set up to protect us from stigma or people berating us. We have to kind of be exemplary if we're going to create the kind of world we want to live in. So, I mean, that I hope. So that's what I want from your listeners, more than.
It's almost like you're a psychedelic counselor or whatever, because doing these psychedelics is a profound experience. And
Yes.
it's hard to explain it to your friends and family that have never done it or maybe never had that deep of an experience. So you're like a source to go to like, hey, can we talk about this? I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about this with somebody who understands and has been there and can kind of be like, oh, here's a perspective.
Yes. And also at the same time is like, I've got on my website, it's like I've got this little online class. It's $20 and it's called Start Your Own Integration Circle, right? Having an integration circle is not rocket science. It's basically, you need a talking stick. You need like 5 people in a talking stick. And it's like, you go around and you talk about what's up for real.
It's like book club, except the book is
your mind, man.
The psychedelic trip. Now the website one more time. It's tamintegration.com.
Tamintegration.com. The Instagram is sort of where I let my sense of humor go.
It's not Tam Integration on there.
Oh, it is. But the Instagram is silly.
Oh,
okay. Sometimes people like listen to me on a podcast and I'm all like serious, and sometimes like I bring a tear to my own eye or something. I get so emotional, and then they go to the Instagram page, and it's just ridiculous. It's just very, very, very silly. Psychedelics are you have to have a sense of humor. You'll lose your goddamn mind.
Well, we're gonna wrap the show up. Time flies when you're having fun. And all I can say about this show is what a long, strange trip it's been and continues to be. I don't know, I just had to say that. Anyway, don't forget, do the show every Wednesday, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. here on KKID Radio. Once again, I want to thank my guest, Daniel Shankin from Tam Integration. That's so cool that he zoomed in with us for this whole hour. And check him out. And check out my band, theshwag.com, The Schwag on Facebook. We got all kinds of fresh videos out. All right, people. I'll see you next time. Peace.
That's all, folks. See you next time.